And welcome. I'm Warren Hoge, IPI Senior Adviser for External Relations, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this Beyond the Headlines event featuring Seyed Hossein Mousavian, author of The Iranian Nuclear Crisis, a Memoir. Our conversation tonight could not be more timely. Last Tuesday in Moscow saw the latest inconclusive episode in the ongoing 9-year-old series of talks on Iran's nuclear program, talks between Iran and the P5+1, that is, of course, the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, Britain, China, France, Russia, and the United States, plus Germany. Those talks adjourned last week with agreement only to continue technical discussions at lower levels and leaving diplomatic efforts to resolve the standoff essentially deadlocked. The parties agreed to hold the technical discussion in Istanbul next Tuesday, saying they hope to clarify the content of the competing proposals tabled by the two sides. If this outcome was more disappointing than similar results in recent years, it was because after 15 months of no talks, there had been a flurry of speculation this spring that Iran was prepared to be more agreeable than it had been to making a deal that would halt its enriching uranium to 20% purity, a rate that is closer to weapons grade than the 3.5% needed for reactor fuel, and one of the reasons the West cites for its belief that Iran is working to develop the capability of building a nuclear bomb. Now, the West has theorized that Iran is newly willing to participate in talks because of the increasingly stringent international sanctions the West has imposed on it. As you know, those measures will become even more severe next week when an EU embargo on importing Iranian oil and new banking sanctions take effect. Our speaker has his own quite different views on whether these sanctions will force the hand of Tehran, and therein lies the value of this book, and I think you will find of this conversation tonight. Hossein was the spokesman for Iran's nuclear negotiating team with the European Union and the International Atomic Energy Agency when the current round of talks got underway in 2003 after the exposure in 2002 of Iran's secret atomic effort. And he continued in high office in Tehran until 2007, when he had a serious falling out with the new president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, and ended up jailed and charged with espionage. By the way, he was acquitted in 2 trials, and since 2009, he has been at Princeton as a research scholar. But his book is written from this privileged insider perspective and within an Iranian mindset, revealing the thinking of the Iranian government behind the various steps it took and the reactions it had to Western moves. Not surprisingly, there are repeated, real, and critical misinterpretations of each side's actions by the other, of each side's overestimating its bargaining leverage. The book, which incidentally is for sale at the door, and copies of which Hossein will be signing at the end of this discussion, the book is fascinating from that standpoint for the lay reader and would be particularly intriguing to the many people in this community schooled in mediation and negotiation, because there is nothing more important in those undertakings than having an accurate picture of the needs and purposes of the adversaries. Reading it, I was put in mind of that extraordinary conference 10 years ago in 2002, in October of 2002, 40 years after the Cuban Missile Crisis, that conference in Cuba that gathered together former Soviet military officials and aides and American aides to President Kennedy like Ted Sorensen and Robert McNamara. And together they sat down and reviewed what each thought the other was up to at this critical moment 40 years before, where the world really teetered on the edge of nuclear showdown. And of course, what they found in that exchange was that they had serious misinterpretations of what each other was doing at the time. If you remember that conference and the coverage of it was very chilling to read of those accounts, and it reminded you once again how important it is that people understand what they're doing, particularly if they're adversaries. Now, I experienced some similar moments of alarm in reading Hossein's memoir and seeing his interpretations of what he considers the risky posturing of the West, and yes, of his own government, over the years leading up to the current impasse. I have heard Hossein speak on 2 occasions, once at a private lunch, and secondly on stage with some of his American counterparts in the nuclear talks, and I can assure you that we are in for an interesting discussion this evening. I am delighted he is here at IPI, and Hossein, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Warren. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to Warren and all of his colleagues at IPI for arranging this event and giving me this opportunity to discuss maybe one of the most delicate issues. Definitely, this is the right time, but I don't know whether the guest speaker is the right man or not. I hope this would be the case. It's about a decade. Iranian nuclear issue is, at least for the US and the West, if not #1 topic, one of the major topics and concerns. And all negotiations during different administrations, either Khatami or Ahmadinejad, have failed. Today, specifically after failure of negotiations in Moscow, there is more concern about a military strike. Everybody in the US, in Europe, in the West, in the international community, they are very much concerned either about a unilateral strike by Israel or a joint operation by Israel and the US. I have discussed in length in my book why military strike would be catastrophic. And I have explained in detail the negative consequences and my conclusion that definitely even military strike would not compel Iran to comply with international community demands on the nuclear issue. Sanctions, unilateral, multilateral sanctions, unprecedented in the history of Iran, has been in place against Iran, and these days they are discussing for more sanctions. Again, this is another issue I have explained in depth in my book why sanctions also would not work. Definitely sanctions would hurt Iranian nation, but this would not make Iran to change its nuclear program. I have discussed other scenarios, covert actions, assassinations, and also there are some people, they raised the possibility of living with a nuclear Iran, believing Iran ultimately would make the bomb, and we should learn how to live with an Iranian bomb. This is also another issue which I have discussed in my book, why Iran is not after nuclear bomb. I have explained all political, security, economic aspects of and the reasons why Iran is not after nuclear bomb. Diplomacy has failed. I believe in diplomacy. I believe we can find a solution in diplomacy, with diplomacy, but why the current diplomacy, at least in recent years, have failed, this is also another issue which I have gone over in detail in my book, why the diplomacy has failed. I'm not going to review all these issues. Many are concerned about a possible military strike, a war, a third war for the US in the Middle East, but I'm more concerned about the different dimensions of war already began. The fact is, economic war against Iran already has begun. Intelligence war covert war or cyber war already has begun. And I do not see serious debates in the media in the US about possible consequences of these dimensions. Cyber war against Iran, the US has launched. Whether this would have no consequences, I really doubt it. And we should be more concerned about the dimensions which already has begun. We should try to stop by a genuine diplomacy. But why we are here today? There is a consensus between the US, Europeans, the IAEA, the international community on the followings. First, Iran does not have nuclear bomb. Second, Iran has not decided to make nuclear bomb. And third, there is no evidence of diversion of the current nuclear program toward military purposes. But if Iran doesn't have nuclear bomb, if Iran has not diverted its nuclear program toward bomb, if Iran has not decided to make nuclear bomb, why Iran has been referred to United Nations Security Council, and Iran is the most sanctioned country in the world, while it doesn't have even one single bomb. Out of discussions, you read also a lot in the papers, they are questioning the intention of Iran. They say we don't know what is the real intention of Iranians, whether Iranians ultimately are going to make nuclear bomb or not. This is the question. Otherwise, there is no dispute about the status quo of the reality that Iran doesn't have already nuclear bomb, and Iran doesn't have decided to go for nuclear bomb. That's why I would like to elaborate a little bit about the intention issue, which is the core issue. This is the only reason the Western countries, they question and they are very much concerned, and they have taken such a harsh actions against Iran. Is the current status quo of Iranian nuclear program is because of Iranian intention or Western policies? If we can respond to this question, then I believe this would be a big step forward. Really, Iran had intention since Revolution 1979 to reach to this status quo, or the Western policies pushed Iran to the current situation. I would review 7 steps with you tonight. Because I really believe Iran had never had policy, program, strategy, intention to reach to the current situation, the status quo of the Iranian nuclear program. This has not been designed. I believe the West pushed Iran to this situation. The first step dates back to era before revolution, Shah's era. I believe there is no dispute that the United States of America laid the foundation of a nuclear Iran, not clerics. It was the US under Atom for Peace program in 1960s decided for Iran to have a nuclear Iran. The first Iranian nuclear project was built by the US in 1967, Tehran research reactor. it was the US decided for Iran to have 23 nuclear power plants within the year 2000. And Europeans, although today they are very much close and cooperating with the US to deprive Iran from its nuclear program, that time they were competing with the US to nuclearize Iran. French signed $1.2 billion for enrichment. Germans, they signed $8 billion for nuclear power plants. They were competing to win the lucrative projects to nuclearize Iran. This was the first step. The West decided to have a nuclear Iran. The second step relates to the situation after revolution. Right after revolution, revolutionaries decided to shrink the ambitious nuclear projects of Shah and military projects. The time they decided to stop maybe 80–90% of the nuclear projects of the Shah, the West decided to withdraw from cooperation with Iran on the nuclear and leave Iran with billions of dollars of unfinished projects. That time, Iran doesn't have any plan to have enrichment. Iran didn't want to have 23 power plants. Iran just was going to finish the Bushehr power plant signed with Germany in 1975, paid about 8 billion Deutsche Mark. The first phase was finished in about 90%. And Iran was supporting the agreement with the France to have a joint venture on enrichment in French soil, not in Iranian soil. It was supposed the enrichment to be in France, not in Iran. But France withdrew, while Iran already had paid $1.2 billion to France. This decision by the West left no choice for Iran to go for self-sufficiency on nuclear technology, to finish the billions of dollars of unfinished projects, and to provide itself fuel for Bushehr power plants, because France decided to decline to provide fuel for Iran. The third step was during the war when Iraq invaded Iran. And unfortunately, the US, the West, the East, they all supported the aggressor. The objective of Saddam was completely clear: to bring a regime change, to disintegrate Iran. When the West fully supported the aggressor, it was the time even Saddam used chemical weapons against Iran. And thousands of Iranians, they were victims of chemical weapons which technology and material, unfortunately, was provided by Western countries. 300,000 Iranians, they were killed during such a war. This war changed the Iranian security calculations totally. Made Iran no other option to build up its military capability, nuclear capability, to deter any further aggression, either by neighbors or by Western countries. This was a clear evidence for Iran to be capable to defend itself, because it was 8 years war, 300,000 Iranians, they were killed, and the West was behind the aggression. The fourth step was failure to compromise with Iran during President Khatami, when I was a part of negotiation team. In that time, very quickly, I review for you, we made offers to EU3, which included cap enrichment at the 5% level, We told them we would never be willing to go beyond 5%. It was a decision by Iran to stay below 5%. Export all low-enriched uranium or fabricated into fuel rods. It means zero stockpile as the best objective guarantee. If Iran is supposed to have no stockpile of any enrichment, then there is no possibility of diversion toward nuclear weapon. We offered them. We not only implemented the additional protocol and subsidiary arrangement, we told them we are ready to ratify permanently, to be committed to additional protocol, subsidiary arrangement, to assure the international community Iran would go forward with the maximum level of transparency on its nuclear activities. Again, we told them we are open for any other or further suggestions you Europeans willing to make to us in order to be sure Iranian nuclear program would never be diverted. The best objective guarantees beyond what we are proposing, we are open to discuss. They didn't buy. At the end of 2 years of implementation of additional protocol, implementation of subsidiary arrangements, even suspension, we even suspended for a year and a half as a confidence-building measure. They brought a package for us asking Iran to go for indefinite suspension, depriving Iran from its legitimate rights under NPT. They couldn't make the deal, Europeans, because the US was not on board in the negotiations. And the US position was no single centrifuge in Iran. If Iran today has 10,000 centrifuges, this is the result. This is the result. If they were able to compromise with us, definitely we were not at the current stages, current situation. The fifth step, the West pushed Iran toward 20%. It was not Iran's decision to go to 20%. You read a lot about the danger of 20%. This is the main issue of discussion today. But everybody forgets this was the West pushed Iran toward 20%. In February 2010, Salehi, which now is foreign minister, that time he was the head of Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, publicly, officially offered the P5+1 for Iran to stay below 5%. And the P5+1 to provide the fuel rods for Iran. They declined. Because Tehran research reactor, the life of the fuel rods are coming to finish. They had to go to make, either to make the 20%, to build the fuel rod, or to get it from the West. There was no other option. This was the fifth step. If the West has accepted the offer February 2010, the time Iran was enriching at 3.5%. And Iran didn't have 20%. Iran was telling publicly to the P5+1 that we are not going to make 20%. We don't want to make it. When the West rejected, they made no other option for Iran to go to build the 20%. The sixth step, the West pushed Iran to build the fuel rods. It was in September 2011. Iranian president was here in your town, New York, publicly offered. Iran in that time had 20%. Iran came forward itself. Everybody is talking about the impact of sanctions. But they all forget it was Iran in September 2011, before sanctions against central bank or oil, Iran voluntarily, in September 2011, proposed the P5+1 officially, publicly, that we are ready to stop 20%. We are ready to go back to below 5% if you provide fuel rod for Tehran research reactor. Just maybe some of you don't know, this is a research reactor which provides isotopes for more than 800,000 Iranians struggling with cancer. They need this production in Iran. And unfortunately, the offer was again rejected. This made Iran to go to build fuel rod. Iran was not going to build fuel rod. And step number 7, I believe, is the golden opportunity the West declined or lost when in summer 2011, the Russian proposed step-by-step plan. Again, keep in mind, the Russians, they proposed step-by-step plan in June, July 2011, when there was no such a crippling sanctions. Let me just review the major elements of this plan. They proposed Iran to stop enrichment at 20%, setting limits on production of 20% enriched uranium, signing the tentative, They proposed Iran to allow full supervision by the IAEA. This is one of the major requirements of the IAEA resolutions and United Nations security resolutions. They want Iran to have full cooperation for full supervision of the IAEA. This was included in the plan. They required Iran, that the plan requires Iran to implement the additional protocol and subsidiary arrangements, which Code 3.1, which this is again one of the major requirements of the United Nations Security Council resolutions and the IAEA resolutions. They ask Iran to stop production of 20%, go back to 5%, halt installation of new centrifuges, no installing new centrifuges, limit the number of enrichment sites. That time, Iran had 2 enrichment sites. The Russians, they proposed for Iran to have only 1 enrichment site. And to address all possible military dimension issues, which means for Iran to go beyond additional protocol, to give access to the IAEA beyond additional protocol.
Explain what the additional protocol is.
Additional protocol is a protocol which practically is completion of the IAEA safeguard agreement, which enables the IAEA to go to the maximum level of inspection. And many countries, they have accepted. Laura would know exactly the numbers here from IAEA. But still many countries, they have not signed and they are not member of additional protocol because of intrusive inspections, which they are permitted to go even to visit the military sites everywhere almost they want. And even in the Russian proposal, there was 3 months of suspension, one of the other requirements of the IAEA and United Nations Security Council resolutions. Iran signaled positively. Iranian foreign minister publicly said, we are ready to discuss, we are positive toward this initiative, and we are ready to discuss the details. But unfortunately, the P5+1, more correctly, the West rejected the plan. This was a proposal containing all the IAEA's and United Nations Security Council resolution requirements. This was, I believe, another step telling Iranians, regardless of the level of cooperation, regardless of transparency, regardless of openness, they don't care. They are after increasing the sanctions, pressures to bring regime change. They don't care, and they just want to use the nuclear issue as an instrument. This was really the conclusion in Tehran after rejecting such a comprehensive proposal by the Russians. Now, one step is left, pushing Iran to make nuclear bomb or not. Israelis, they are pushing the US and Europeans to limit their options for more devastating, crippling sanctions and to go forward to attack Iran. If it happened, I'm sure Iran would withdraw from NPT and would make nuclear bomb. Whether the West would go the last step, making Iran to build the nuclear bomb, which Iran doesn't want, this is the other question. I believe it's better, Warren, to stop here. By the way, all these issues which I raised today in detail and in depth, I have explained in my book. Also, I have presented a comprehensive package how diplomacy can be successful.
I'm going to continue the conversation because I have all notes from the book here, and just a couple of points in addition to what you said. For instance, you just mentioned in the end talking about the possible Israeli threat. You say in the book that Iranians don't believe that is a threat. They believe the only threat is the United States. Is that correct?
Iranians, they do not consider Israel as a real threat. They believe the real threat, security threat for Iran is the United States. And they believe Israel would never be able to attack Iran unilaterally, except with the cooperation and the backup of the United States. This is what they believe, Warren.
Sure. Now, I want to review something else you say in the book and then ask a question at the end of it. In a very broad series of paragraphs, Hossein writes that there are two major miscalculations, one on each side. He has already reviewed for you the miscalculations that he believes the West made. The miscalculation he writes he believes Iran made was to not realize that the West would be successful in bringing Iran, a member of the NPT, and a cooperator with the IAEA to the agenda of the Security Council. That's the statement. Now, my question is this, and this brings it up to the present time. You say, if the red line for the West is enrichment, I'm not optimistic for any kind of solution. The West was successful in bringing this to the Security Council. There are 6 Security Council resolutions that find that an enrichment stands in violation of those Security Council resolutions, and even some additional IAEA injunctions. So my question is, even if, given your reasoning, and I certainly understand it, isn't it unrealistic politically to expect the P5+1 to give up on enrichment now that they have 6 Security Council resolutions backing them?
The miscalculations, what I explained here is not, maybe you can interpret as miscalculations, but I believe wrong policies. But during the time we were negotiating, we were confronting with 2 miscalculations. One was in our side domestically. Some politicians in Iran, they believed the West would never be able to take Iran to Security Council. And this is just a bluff. And there was tremendous pressure on nuclear negotiation team that you people, you are intimidated because nobody would be able to take it to Security Council. They had their own justification, by the way, because they were saying Iran is a member of NPT, Iran is cooperating with the IAEA, inspectors, they are there. Iranian enrichment facility is under IAEA camera 24 hours. Iran doesn't have nuclear bomb. There is no reason to take Iran to Security Council. They were right. But the miscalculation was the Iranian nuclear issue was not technical issue, was political issue. And today is a political issue. It's not technical issue. They know Iran doesn't have nuclear bomb. They know Iran is not going to make nuclear bomb. It's clear for them. I believe even if they don't say, they know very well Iran is not after bomb. It's a political issue. Miscalculation in the Western side, they believed by prolongation of negotiations, they would be able to drag Iran to a situation which ultimately Iran would cease its enrichment activities. We were telling them very, very sincerely, clearly, openly, that no one in Iran would be able to deprive Iranian nation from its legitimate rights under NPT. It doesn't matter if this is cleric, Islamic Republic, or monarchy. If is Shah as the US ally, it was the red line for Shah, and this is the red line for Islamic Republic. It really doesn't matter. Even if they bring regime change, this would remain the red line. You are asking me, Warren, whether this is feasible for the P5+1 to put politically to put the red line enrichment as the red line. First of all, I'm confident if the red line is enrichment, there would be no solution. The reason is clear. You are going to deprive a nation, a member of NPT, from its right on their NPT. You are going to single out Iran as the only country deprived from its legitimate rights under NPT. Nobody can do it. Nobody. Whether this is Khatami or Ahmadinejad or Rafsanjani, that really doesn't matter. Nobody. This is the matter of national consensus. Politically, I believe this is definitely feasible, Warren, because if you want Iran to be member of international community, it means you want Iran to be member of all weapons of mass destruction conventions. Am I right? You want Iran to be the member of all weapons of mass destruction conventions, chemical convention, biological weapon conventions, NPT, non-proliferation treaty, nuclear. If Iran is supposed to be member of all the conventions, to be a member of international community, Iran should be able to enjoy its rights against its commitments under all these conventions. If Iran is supposed to have all limitations, not to have nuclear bomb, not to have chemical bomb, not to have biological bombs, which they are already member of these conventions, Iran should be able to enjoy its rights under these conventions to enjoy peaceful technology. If you are supposed to deprive Iran because you don't trust Iran, because of the mistrust, because of the mistrust you have toward Iranians, which definitely Iranians, they have more mistrust toward the West. If you are going to deprive Iran from its legitimate rights to enjoy peaceful technologies, chemical, biological, and nuclear, then what would be the reason for Iran to stay as member of chemical, nuclear, biological weapon conventions? Only commitments, no rights. Maybe somebody, you may find somebody to be completely crazy to accept a convention to be deprived from all the rights, because this would be the same question on chemical convention. Tomorrow you can tell Iranians that because we don't trust you, you should not have sophisticated chemical technology, because we don't trust you, we don't cooperate with you. You should not have biological technology because you can make bomb. This would be the same justification. Rights are coming with commitments. This is the only way you would be able to keep Iran as member of chemical, biological, nuclear, and all weapons of mass destruction conventions.
Hossein, as you write in the book, in 2005, you were there when Khatami was in power. That's when you were in power yourself. In 2005, when Ahmadinejad becomes president, he asked you, among some other people, if you would be interested in becoming his foreign minister. You write in the book that you told him you would not because you did not agree with his aggressive foreign policy. And of course, that ended up getting you in jail a couple of years later. My question is, you were obviously a victim at that point of the factionalism in the Iranian leadership. You also admit in the book that the supreme leader probably favors the Ahmadinejad view of the world more than he favors the Khatami or the Rafsanjani more moderate view. Is there still factionalism in the Iranian leadership, or do they speak with one voice?
If they speak completely with one voice, then you would say this is dictatorship. When they have differences, they challenge each other, then you say, Iran is disputed, we don't know to whom we should listen, who is deciding. We really don't know. I mean, in Iran, we don't know what to do. But I think that there are a great amount of different opinions in Iran, like in the US, like in Europe. You would never be able to have one voice between Republicans and Democrats, except on the major issues of national interest, which for Iranians, the nuclear is one of the issues. All political stripes in the country, they have one voice, the rights. They don't want nuclear bomb, but they want the rights. That's it. Yes, he invited me when he was elected. I really didn't know what the elected president is going to talk to me. It was a day before our flight to London to have the last round of negotiations with EU3. And he told me he has 5 candidates in his mind, and I'm the first one. As a foreign minister, and he asked me to give him my program for foreign policy. We discussed for 2 hours different aspects of foreign relation, and there was really no single issue. We had common understanding. And I told him there is a huge gap. And that's why I could not accept. Even though if I would have accepted, I don't know whether he would have introduced me or not. This is another issue, but this was something between us. See, many people like me, they have their differences with either president or parliament or judiciary on economic policy, political policy, nuclear policy. The differences are there. But what I have discussed, Warren, in my book on the nuclear issue, I want to tell the West, this is not the case. You can use differences inside the country to deprive Iran. Iranians would never give up, and they will all be united to defend their rights. It doesn't matter. This is Hossein Mousavian or Khatami or Ahmadinejad or Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi. It really doesn't matter.
I have 2 more questions. The last question is your final prescription of what would be the perfect deal. I have it from the book here. Before that, I want to ask you about Obama and the U.S. and the election. You write in the book that Obama brought the hope of change, but has not brought a new diplomatic approach. And you even mentioned that he turned down a direct offer in November 2009 to make a deal with the U.S. My question is, despite, I have 2 questions. One is, Do the Iranians, are they looking at the American election, gaming it, trying to decide what would be the best outcome for them? If they have misgivings on Obama, certainly they must have more concern about a Romney presidency, or is that not right?
I believe there is no serious preference in Iran because specifically the leadership believes both Republicans and Democrats' core policy is regime change. Therefore, it doesn't matter who is ruling the U.S. They are analyzing the 30 years of U.S. policy toward Iran, and they believe this is the case. Obama definitely, when he came to office, I believe he was the only U.S. president, at least majority of Iranian politicians, they did not question his intention. They believed he has a good intention. But even from the beginning, they doubted whether he would be able to deliver. And specifically these days, this is after my book, when you read New York Times saying Obama in the first month in his office issued a directive to accelerate, to increase cyber war against Iran, definitely they would be more suspicious even about the intention. But when he came to office, there were a great hopes in Iran that maybe his engagement policy would change 30 years of hostility between Iran and the US. What I'm discussing in my book, I believe Obama has made one practical overture during his presidency, which was the swap deal between Iran and the P5+1 in October 2009, when for the first time the U.S. Undersecretary Bill Burns met Iranian Secretary of National Security Council Jalili in Geneva, and principally they agreed. And later this failed. All Americans, Europeans, they believe Iranians, they were guilty of failure of this compromise and agreement. I believe this is not the case. What they agreed in Geneva, the deal was for Iran to export 80% of its stockpile to get fuel rod for Tehran. Simply, this was the deal. Jalili told the P5+1 and even Bill Burns that principally we agree. We need to discuss the details. When they discussed in Tehran, Tehran came back to P5+1 and said, we are ready. Principally, again, this is the position. We accept it. But because we do not trust countries like France, while we had enrichment contract, we paid them 1.2 billion, and they canceled the enrichment contract with us, agreement. And if we give up the 80% of a stockpile in advance, there is no confidence after 2 years you would give us the fuel rod or not. They asked for simultaneous exchange. They said, we are ready to give you 80%, give us the fuel rod at the same time in Iranian soil. This was rejected by the P5+1. But a month later, Iranian head of Atomic Energy Organization, Salehi, called al-Baradei and asked him to talk with Obama and tell him Iran is ready to make the deal with no precondition, as agreed in Geneva with the US. Iran was going to make the deal direct with the US. The US declined. In the third step, I think it was in January 2010, which Iranian official here in New York informed a US official that Iran is ready. If the US is not ready for direct deal, then we are ready to make the deal as we agreed in Geneva with no precondition. The US official told Iranian official that you first have to suspend enrichment, while suspension was not a part of the deal in Geneva. And the last one was President Obama, who encouraged the Brazilian president and Prime Minister of Turkey to go to Tehran to make the deal based on Geneva negotiations. And they went to Tehran. The agreement was signed, but the US immediately rejected the agreement and went for sanction 1929, which is the most comprehensive sanctions against Iran into multilateral sanctions. But if you study Obama's administration, definitely you would conclude the most pressures, sanctions. This is not confidential. Obama himself came to public here in New York and said, I have been the only president which could organize the international community to bring the most sanctions against Iran. If this is the result of engagement, I wonder whether such an engagement is going to work or not.
Before I ask you the last question, I want to, about the final deal. You've given me an opportunity to promote both the New York Times and IPI in the same sentence, so I'm going to take it. You mentioned a little while ago, Hossein, that there had been nothing in the Western media about the dangers, the extraordinary dangers of cyber war and what it poses. In fact, the New York Times yesterday ran an op-ed by Misha Glenny, the British author of the book Dark Market. Misha was here 6 months ago at this table as we promoted that book and Misha in this same series of conversations we're having right now. So there, IPI, New York Times in the same sentence. Last question.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
The last question I want to ask you is in two parts. What, next Tuesday in Istanbul, what would you like to see the P5, or what do you think the P5 is capable of doing, the P5+1, in its next meeting with Iran, which happens in Istanbul Tuesday? And then the second part of the question is, and you mentioned this in the book, what do you see as the shape of the final deal that the West and Iran could make?
The final deal is a...
First of all, Tuesday.
Yeah. First of all, Tuesday. I believe rather than asking Iran elements which is in contrary with NPT would be a mistake. Do not challenge the rights of a nation. It's not going to happen. If you are worried about the nuclear bomb, why the P5+1 is not able to prepare a long list of maximum level of transparency for Iran to adhere to all international conventions, protocols, arrangements at the maximum level, to show transparency at the maximum level in this world exists, in order to secure the transparency, completely open nuclear program in Iran. One of the, I have discussed many elements. One of the elements is the consortium idea which Iranian president offered here in New York in 2005. He offered to establish a joint consortium in Iran on the facilities. Why they did not accept it? This could be one major step forward for transparency and confidence building if the other countries concerned, like Saudi Arabia, they were ready to come to join us in the activities. The second part of the P5+1 proposal should deal with breakout capability. The first part with transparency, like additional protocol, subsidiary arrangement, complementary accesses, whatever they want to include, whatever, at the maximum level, which I say internationally exists. On breakout capability, also they can propose Iran different measures. For example, for a period, Iran not to have reprocessing. For example, for a period of confidence building, Iran go below 5%, no enrichment above 5%, because everyone knows there is no danger with enrichment 3.5%. For example, this is my main initiative, my main offer, to work with Iran on a zero stockpile initiative. I mean, this is my main idea. You may find some temporary solutions, but you need to have sustainable solution. Zero stockpile permanently. What do I mean? Iran has rights for 20% enrichment. Other countries in Europe, they are enriching up to 93%. They are member of NPT. But a committee between Iran and the P5+1 permanently would determine the amount of consumption Iranians they need domestically, either about 3.5% enriched uranium or 20%. Whatever Iranians they need domestically, to convert it to fuel rod for isotopes, for patients, cancer patients, and for other peaceful purposes. The additional amount either would be exported or would be immediately converted to 3.5, to fabricated to metal, to fuel rods. In this way, Iran forever would remain zero stockpile. This is the status quo, which I believe in the best way would contribute to peaceful purposes of Iranian nuclear program, because as long as Iran doesn't have any stockpile, always, ever, there would be no diversion. Such a measures, I believe the technicians from the United States, Europe, Russians, they are much more expert than me to propose measures for breakout capability, to prevent breakout capabilities. There are some examples which I said.
And finally, the shape of the final deal. You say in the book you think the final deal ought to be across a broad field, not just about the nuclear program.
Yeah, the final
Iraq,
deal I forgot to say, first of all, on nuclear, for Iran to stay forever non-nuclear weapon state. This would be the deal. The measures, elements, this is partly we have discussed, they can discuss more. I believe the nuclear issue is a subsidiary issue of Iran-US, Iran-West relations. Because clearly I see other countries like India, Pakistan, they are not member of NPT, they have nuclear bomb, and they have a strategic cooperation with the US, just because they have good relation with the US. Maybe Laura here would criticize me, but I would like also to mention in 2004, 2005, 3 countries were found in non-compliance: Iran, Egypt, South Korea. They took only Iran to United Nations Security Council to sanctions. They did not take they got non-compliance, Egypt and South Korea. They got non-compliance, but they did not take them to United Nations Security Council, sanctions them, because they were a good friend of the US. That's why even during the Shah, it was clear for the US and the West that Shah is going to make nuclear bomb. It was clear. Shah made official public statements. And it is a CIA report I have in my book in 1974, writing to US president. If Shah were alive within mid-1980s, Iran would have nuclear bomb. Despite of all these assessments, they were supporting Shah for nuclear activities because Shah was the ally of the US. Therefore, Iran-US relation is a major factor. That's why always I have been proposing we need a parallel package. One package for nuclear to be discussed between Iran and the P5+1, and one package between Iran and the US on all bilateral, regional, international issues to revive Iran-US relation, but a new relation based on non-interference and mutual respect, not relation like during the Shah, because we are not going to have another revolution. And the third element, I have proposed in my book as a long-term solution is a nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East and better WMD-free zone in the Middle East. And why such efforts? The US has mobilized international community against Iran, which doesn't have nuclear bomb. Why the US and the West is not using such efforts to bring WMD-free zone in the Middle East? And the last one is double standard. The West needs to stop double standards. Double standards, which I mentioned some of them. To have strategic relations with countries which they have nuclear bomb. They are not member of NPT, and put all the sanctions of the world against a country which is member of NPT and doesn't have nuclear bomb. At the end, for long term, it's not going to work.
Thank you. Now, I'd love to get some questions and comments from the floor. If you'd raise your hand, I'm going to call on you. And I think I'll do 2 or 3 at once. In the far back of the room, and then Peter Berezovsky, you're the next, and then here, William Verdone in the front row. We'll take 3 questions, Hossein, and then answer them afterwards, and then take some more.
Good evening. Thank you very much. My name is Omni. I'm from the Permanent Mission of Morocco in New York. And I had the chance also to be in in Vienna when the issue of the Iranian nuclear program started to be considered by the IEA. It was a very interesting presentation. I would like to ask you a question. During the 6 or 7 steps you described very eloquently, what behavior or a foreign policy decision or a position by the Islamic Republic of Iran you may qualify as a mistake that might have contributed to where we are now, or just complicated maybe the issue further? Thank you.
Okay. Peter?
Thank you.
Peter, I know you, but please introduce yourself.
Peter Berezovsky, Consul General of Austria. First of all, heartfelt thanks, Warren. Another extraordinary evening of in-depth analysis, amazing. Compliments to you, Mr. Mousavian. It's very brave to go so much into details, not discussing something 50 years ago, but 5 to 7 years ago. First point, you mentioned, rightly so, you were one of the chief architects, President Khatami's endeavors, and you called it the Western's lost chance, golden chance to find a compromise. As it happens, in 2005, I was the ambassador for international relations and conference in Austria, and I organized Islam in a pluralistic world, and maybe you were there. We had the President Khatami, who had an extraordinary performance, then just ex-president, and I recall it was a wonderful statement, but many people said a lot of rhetorics, but maybe President Khatami missed one or the other chance. So without wanting to go into this blaming game a la Virginia Woolf or cat on a hot tin roof, it's not useful to blame each other. But do you think personally that also President Khatami on your side lost one or the other chance? Because I feel the West was prepared for some compromise. Second question, much shorter. I was also in charge of Austria and the Atomic Energy Agency with the amazing, extraordinary Director General El Baradei, and now we have another extraordinary Director General, the Japanese Amato. What would be your personal proposals as you have this in-depth knowledge? If you were the next Director General of Atomic Energy Agency, what would you try in terms of confidence-building measures to really bring the process ahead?
Thank you.
Iranian issue? On Iranian nuclear issue?
Yeah.
Okay.
And finally, William Verdone in the front row.
Yes, thank you. William Verdone, African Views Organization. I wanted to pick up on the thread you mentioned about a regime change. Change specifically from outside forces, but there's a flip side. There could be a regime change from within. You have a disenfranchised youth. You have unemployment, rampant inflation, dwindling oil profits, and hardline religious rigidity. If the youth decide to change the regime, do we then pursue, or do we diffuse the nuclear crisis and on to nuclear power and nuclear energy. Thank you.
Okay. Can you take those questions?
Yeah, I start from here. I believe definitely there are domestic problems, but Iran is not at the stage of regime change because of domestic problems. This is wrong assessment in the West. I just left the country a month, maybe after election. And when I came here, a lot of people, they were asking me, Hossein, regime change is gonna happen. Tell us. I said, it's not gonna happen. Definitely it's not gonna happen. Because it was the time everybody in US, European media were concluding now within 2-3 months the regime would be changed because of green movement and all these issues. But even if we have regime change in Iran, I said before there would be no change in Iranian nuclear policy. Let me add one more. If the current system, they are religious. Iran is the only country worldwide, in addition to NPT, religiously has obliged itself against weapons of mass destruction. You cannot find any other country in this world religiously against weapons of mass destruction.
That's the 1995 fatwa, yes?
1995, and during the war with Iraq, you remember Saddam used chemical weapon, but Imam Khomeini did not permit Iranian military to reciprocate with chemical weapons because religiously they believe this is haram, forbidden. You may do not like a religious system in Iran, but if you are talking about weapons of mass destruction, Pakistan, they don't have such a fatwa. Saudi Arabia, they don't have such a fatwa. I mean, if you can find any other Muslim country or Christian country or Jewish country with such a fatwa, just let me know. That's why you should be a leader on the nuclear issue. At least you should respect such a religious decision. And if there is a change, nationalistic groups, definitely, they would be much more eager and maybe with more ambitious on the nuclear issue. If I'm supposed to be the general director of the IAEA, which would never happen, but I would take initiative, Ambassador, to tell the P5+1, to tell them do not politicize issues related to the IAEA. This would be disaster for non-proliferation. If Iran today is more sanctioned than North Korea, while North Korea withdrew from NPT and built nuclear weapon, Iran is member of NPT and doesn't have nuclear weapon, but Iran is more sanctioned. This means the P5+1, they have politicized a technical issue which is related only to the IAEA to verify. Iranian nuclear issue has become too much, Ambassador, too much politicized. That's why I believe IAEA role today is 5%. 95% they decide about the IAEA direction. The IAEA role should be 95%. And for such an initiative, I would propose publicly, and I would resist. I would propose to P5+1, to United Nations Security Council, a package of elements which can assure the international community on non-diversion of Iranian nuclear facilities toward nuclear bomb. This is the responsibility of the IAEA. The IAEA is the sole international agency to work on non-proliferation, non-diversion. They should propose. About the missed opportunities, definitely I believe there has been missed opportunities from Iranian side, from American side, from European side. The reason I emphasized, I have also, maybe 90% of my book is explaining Iranian perspective. Because I believe what you are reading in the West is 99% the Western perspective. And I want to help politicians, academics to understand Iranian perspective in order to help a possible solution. Just as long as you don't understand the perspective of the other side of negotiation, the point of view, how you can find a solution. But definitely there has been missed opportunity. If I were in a position to decide in my country, the time, for example, Madeleine Albright came publicly, apologized for the U.S. support for Shah, for the U.S. support for Saddam, and she publicly apologized. If I was in position in Iran to decide, then I would have said, this is enough, now we sit together, we negotiate rapprochement.
I see lots of hands. We'll do 3 more right now, and then we'll get to another round. This gentleman here, I think, did you raise your hand? Well, no, John Hirsch did, but I thought somebody else did there. I'm sorry, yes. You're first, John Hirsch is second, and Jeff Laurenti is third, and then we'll do another round. And please make your question short, because lots of people want to ask them.
My name is Amr El-Gouili. I'm from the Permanent Mission of Egypt. Thank you very much. It was very enlightening, and I promise to read the book to learn more about it. A quick question. 2012 is supposed to hold the UN conference, or the NPT-related conference on a zone free of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East. And I was wondering, how would that opportunity be a catalyst for solving the Iranian nuclear file, given that it would allow for tackling the issue in a regional context, whereby obviously the only non-NPT party, Israel, would also be dealt with at the same time. And a small side note, and probably correction, Egypt was never found non-compliant within the IAEA, not whatsoever. I would let South Koreans speak for themselves. There were 5 pending issues with the IAEA. They've been fully resolved after 1 or 2 Governors' Councils meeting, but there's never been a foundation of non-compliance. Thank you.
Laura, South Korea and Egypt, they were in non-compliance.
I don't remember the formulation of the language, that there is some differences of view as to whether they constituted non-compliance, but they were clearly...
Yeah. We're webcasting this, so we need you to speak to the microphone.
No, there were clearly breaches that were identified, but I cannot recall whether the word non-compliance was formally used.
Yeah, let me go to John Hirsch.
Thank you very much.
First of all, thank you very much for your presentation. You made the point that this is not really a technical issue, but a political issue. President Ahmadinejad, speaking in the General Assembly and elsewhere, called publicly for the destruction of the State of Israel, or the elimination of the State of Israel. I believe that many people in political positions in the United States believe this to be the policy of the Iranian government, and they therefore believe that, notwithstanding all of the context you've given us this evening, that there is an intention to build a bomb, because Iran cannot, by a land army, reach Israel, or it'll be very difficult anyway. So there's a sort of a generalized presumption in the American political spectrum that this is the intention. So what I'd like to ask you, number one, is whether that is the official policy of the government of Iran. If it's not the official policy of the government of Iran, can you envisage President Ahmadinejad or somebody else getting up publicly and saying that it's not the official, that they want coexistence, in other words, with Israel? That would politically, I would suggest, perhaps diffuse much of the suspicion and distrust that you refer to. Thank you.
Very good. And Jeff?
Thank you.
Hossein, like John, thank you very much for a brilliant exposition. Merci.
Identify yourself for the...
Oh, yes, right. Jeff Laurenti with the Century Foundation. And first, an aside tacked on to John's question, given Ahmadinejad's extraordinary radioactivity on questions of Israel, the denial of the Holocaust and all that, last year, quite strikingly, he made what must have been some kind of feeler in talking about Israelis not being the enemy, but Israel government policy that got him a lot of hot water among hardliners in Tehran. Was that supposed to be a signal to somebody that was not then requited? My question to you, though, asks, how do officials in Tehran account for the extraordinary solidarity among the P5 on Iran's nuclear program? That is, it's one thing, perhaps, if the Europeans docilely follow the Americans, but the Russians and the Chinese are not lapdogs of Washington. How do they explain in Tehran how come the Russians and the Chinese are very much after them, and how could they possibly have missed the very clear signals from Moscow and Beijing that they were crossing a huge red line to find themselves now in the hot water with all these sanctions, that the Russians and the Chinese have stayed on the same page as the West on?
Want to take those three?
Yeah. Definitely, I'm not spokesman of Iranian government, and I really have no official position at all. Fortunately, Wahid, my old colleague from Iranian mission, is here, and he would be able to explain. But as far as I know, while I was 8 years as the head of a Foreign Relations Committee of National Security Council, 1997 to 2005, I know the official policy of Iran on Israel is free election between Jewish, Muslim, Christians, and Iran would respect the decision. And on your question, why nobody came to public, definitely Iranian leader, supreme leader, which by constitution, the ultimate decision maker on foreign policy, not the president, not foreign minister, the supreme leader is ultimate decision maker. He came just a short while after the noises on Ahmadinejad's statement wiping Israel off the map. He came to Friday prayer publicly. He said, I'm announcing clearly the policy of Iran on Israel is free election between Jewish, Muslims, and Christians, and Iran would respect the decision. He made this statement, but if the international media focused for 6-7 years more on Ahmadinejad's statement, this is political issue. And just, I don't know whether some of you read an interview by Deputy Prime Minister of Israel about a month ago. He made public that from the beginning, we Israelis knew Ahmadinejad has never made such a statement. And we just used it. He said, we knew that Ahmadinejad never said Israel should be wiped off the map. This is a very clear statement from the Israeli administration that there was no such a statement. It was definitely a misinterpretation. Definitely, it was misinterpretation. But on Russia and China, Jeff, I believe this was one of, again, miscalculations. And we were told even during our period, in my book, I have discussed 7 approaches debating inside Iran. One approach which all of them you read in the papers. There is nothing secret. You can read all my approaches, the approaches I have explained. You can read in Iranian media, world media. There is one approach from since 2003 saying that Iran should withdraw from NPT and maintains again today that Iran should withdraw from NPT. This is one political of thought in Iran. There was one political of thought in Iran even challenging our policy, proposing us to go to east rather than west. Do not count on west. Of course, during our negotiation time, we were discussing very closely with Russia, China, non-aligned movement, but then the main negotiating partner was EU, while that time there was a red line for the negotiation team to discuss with the US. We had no other option. And when we were changed, this was an opportunity for the successors to test whether they can count only on Russia and China or not. They tried. But when the resolutions were issued and Russia voted, China voted, India voted, they were shocked.
I saw some more hands in the middle of the row. Let me say, Bill Lewis, Saul, and the gentleman there.
Sorry, I left one question, sorry.
Oh, wait, Bill.
Sorry, from Egypt. Egypt and Iran, they are the father of nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East. And I really believe this is, as I said, and I have described in my book, this is the long-term solution. The international community, if they are really against weapons of mass destruction, they should support this initiative, either nuclear weapon-free zone or weapons of mass destruction-free zone in the Middle East. This should be taken much more serious, which I believe the West and the US during last 4 decades, they have never been serious to take it serious. And I hope in 2012 conference, the Iranian nuclear issue would be a reason for them to support weapons of mass destruction-free zone in the Middle East.
Okay, the three we had, starting with Bill Lewis. And after these three, I have two last final ones.
You want me to stand up so you can see me, Hossein? Thank you, Bill Lewis. Thank you for your elegant and professional explanation of these very complex issues. There's nobody who can do it as well as you, and that's why I'm going to ask you two more complicated questions. One is that, well, in this country, there are two things that are questioned about your intention, Iran's intentions with regard to nuclear. One is the large and active missile program that is being developed, including discussions that you want an intercontinental ballistic missile or a missile that can function that way. The second is if you don't have an active program for more nuclear reactors, why do you need so much low-enriched uranium that seems to have no end? Those are the two questions.
Yep.
Did they understand?
Okay. The second?
Yep.
Oh, the second was right there. Yeah, and then you, Saul.
My name is Kazuhiko, and I'm with the Japanese mission here to the UN. I was in Tehran when you were arrested.
Could you just raise the microphone? I'm not able to hear you. Yeah,
my name is Kazuhiko. I'm with the Japanese mission to the UN, and I was in Tehran when you were arrested by the Iranian authority, after the election. So I felt that was quite a shock to me. And my deep sympathy to you then and now. My question is very simple.
Living in Iran, you are used to different issues which shocked you, not only
Yeah. My question is very simple about this time factor. Do you think that this present situation, present stalemate continues as it is? Do you think the time is on the Iranian side or on the West side? I just like to ask your candid view on that. Thank you.
And then Saul.
My name is Saul. I'm from the Costa Rica mission to the UN. Thank you, as everybody. I think it was very, very, very good explanation. I was very pessimistic during your presentation because with all the elements that you presented, I thought it will be very, very difficult to get out of this situation. But once the questions started and you answered some of them, I saw that maybe there is still some hope to avoid a catastrophe. But I mean, we are talking about a possible nuclear war in the Middle East, or very serious war, a very serious conflict, and elsewhere, not just some interesting academic issue. So I think we have come to the point where this requires extraordinary actions, not to follow the same logic that we have followed up to now. Now, you said, and that's why I became a bit more optimistic, one could interpret that one of the things that worries here in the West, because there is this big gap of trust between the two sides, is the position about destroying Israel and all of that. But as you presented, maybe this is not such a fundamental issue for Iran. So maybe the way to go is if the Iranians lower deeply, very seriously this issue. I mean, they will win the public opinion everywhere. The leaders in the West or in the world will have less basis for, let's say, the logic that they have been followed out to now. And maybe it's worthwhile. So I don't understand why that doesn't happen. And we continue in some kind of negotiations that up to now, what have made is to enlarge the gap between the sides. I could go on, but I know that we have to finish, so I hope I made myself clear. Thank you.
Bill, on your first question about missile, this is again one of the issues which you can consider in the context of why, what I explained on the nuclear. Iran didn't have missile program at all after revolution. When Iran was attacked by missiles, you remember it was Iraq who started attacking Iran by missiles. 1,800 missiles launched by Saddam against civilians. And you cannot imagine really each missile, what consequences each missile had. I was in Tehran during the nights. My wife, which is here, was pregnant. Just half a mile, a missile was launched. I went over there, 100 people in the midnight, they were killed. The international community did not take any step to prevent missile war against Iran. Then Iranian decided to go for missile technology. And today's missile capability of Iran is because of that event. We should always understand the root causes other than unilaterally condemn Iran. Why Iran went after missile? Why? And today, Bill, you know better than me, Iran is encircled with US military army. Iran has 15 neighbors. The United States Army is in the border of 12 countries around Iran. And Iran's missile capability is not because of the neighbors. Believe me, Iran does not feel threat about any of its neighbors at all, neither Saudi Arabia, nor Bahrain, or Qatar, or Israel. The Iranians, they believe the US military presence in the Persian Gulf, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Saudi Arabia, everywhere, surrounded Iran, with always threatening Iran. I mean, all US presidents, they have been keeping to say all options are on the table. Then do you really expect Iran not to do anything to build up the military capability? If you are the president of Iran, definitely you would do. Why Iran is building enrichment? What I explained, Bill, it was about the years after revolution. I said after revolution, Iran decided to stop ambitious projects of Shah just to complete Bushehr. That time, the US was telling Iran, you should not and you cannot have nuclear power plants. It was not the issue about enrichment. You remember, Bill, very well. The US was going to deprive Iran even from power plants, nuclear power plants. This was the position of Europe and US. That's why the US and Europeans, they did not complete, I mean, the US did not let the Germans to come to complete the Bushehr power plant. That time, the position was even no nuclear power plants. When Iran built the enrichment, mastered the enrichment technology, then the US was shocked. They said, no, oh, hold on. Now you can have power plants, but no enrichment. This game is dangerous. It means you want Iran to have nuclear bomb to respect Iran's right for enrichment below 5%. Other than this, you would never accept. This is the story of what you did with Iran about nuclear power plants. But don't forget, Bill, it was, I think in mid-2000, the Iranian parliament decided to revive the old proposal of America for Iran to have 20 power plants, and this is now a legislation in the parliament. They welcomed US proposal in Iranian parliament to have for Iran 20 power plants. This was a reaction to the pressures US and the West put on us that you cannot have enrichment. Then they went and they ratified, now is legislation that Iran should have 20 power plants. But the current enrichment facilities bill, if Iran complete Bushehr with 50, 60,000 centrifuges, this would be only enough for Bushehr power plant. Therefore, this is not additional to the domestic needs of Iran. Now, Iran has about 10,000 centrifuges, which even is not capable to provide fuel rod for Bushehr power plant. Whether the time is in the interest of Iran or the West, I believe neither is in the interest of Iran nor the West. They are both making mistake. And this is really a lose-lose game. I remember in 2005, I told my European friends that we are ready to have a pilot plan and to export even the production of this pilot plan. Do not keep 1 milligram. And to negotiate for, let's say, another year until you can define for us the objective guarantees Iran should be committed for non-diversion. And they told us we cannot agree because the US says no single centrifuge in Iran. Today, I said, if Iran has 5,000, 6,000 kilogram of LEU, 160, 170 kilogram of 20% enriched fuel rod, is because they made Iran to go for 20%. Iran didn't want to go to 20%. But at the same time, Iran has now more sanctions and pressures, which is hurting the nation. You know, my problem is that the sanction is hurting the ordinary people. This is a revenge from Iranian nation. That's why always I have been against sanctions. And the sanctions radicalize Iranian domestic situation and radicalize Iranian position. This is something the West does not understand. They believe the sanctions are working and Iran would give up. It is not the case. The sanctions, even it works, it would radicalize Iranian position. This would be completely counterproductive. And about nuclear war, I believe there is no nuclear war. It is not going to happen because we have only one country with nuclear weapon in the Middle East. There is no other country in the Middle East to have nuclear weapon that we should ever be afraid of a possible nuclear war. But neither, even if Iran possesses nuclear bomb, neither Iranian nuclear bomb is existential threat for Israel, nor Israeli nuclear bomb is existential threat for Iran. Is clear. And why Iran is not ready to cool down, I believe Iranians, they made excellent overtures in Moscow. Iran accepted some of major demands of the P5+1 in Moscow. They were demanding Iran on 20%, second on the stockpile of 20%, third on cooperation with the IAEA to remove the ambiguities, implement additional protocol, subsidiary arrangement, and fourth, to address the possible military dimension issues, which requires Iran to give access to the IAEA beyond additional protocol, unlimited access. Iran was positive about all four major issues in Moscow. But the P5+1, I mean, not Russia and China, practically Europe and the US, they were not ready to move at all on the two demands of Iran, recognition of its legitimate rights and gradual lifting of sanctions. This is a very good opportunity. They are going to, in July, I think they should welcome again Iranian overtures because they are ready to make deal on 20%. They are ready to make deal on the stockpile. They are ready to accept, to sign the tentative agreement. There is a tentative agreement agreed already between Iran and the IAEA, which enables the IAEA to work to remove all technical ambiguities. Iran is ready to sign it in case the political compromise is reached. This is the time. They should not lose the time.
We're actually out of time, but I have agreed with my head on two questioners, both of whom happen to be Iranian. So please make them very fast because I want to give Hossein time to sign the books. And Vahid Karimi, you can have the last word. Well, it's one or the other. We're just out of time. Okay.
Hi, my name is Shireen Barghi. I'm with the International Health Awareness Network. I wanted to ask, do you believe in dealing with Iran's nuclear issue? The IAEA has changed its approach under the leadership of Mr. Amano as opposed to that of Mr. El-Baradei? Thank you.
Very good question. And finally, Vahid, do you want to ask a question? Okay.
Thanks.
Vahid should help me to respond to questions, not asking me questions.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you, Ambassador. It was very enjoyable experience, scientific and technical. We have to use the experience. My question is very short. Ambassador, how sure are you that this problem is between Iran and United States? Because you refer to the Western countries as a whole, whereas there are some other European, E3. We had bad experience of E3 as they betrayed, during the Khatami, as you mentioned, somehow. My question is, how do you rank these 4 or 5 European countries? Which one is intransigent against Iran, more hard, against Iran's position? Thank you very much.
IAEA, in my understanding, clearly has changed its approach. El-Baradei was more impartial. At the end of his career, 9 years, 8 years of inspecting Iranian nuclear facilities, I don't know, more than 3,000 man-days of inspections. He came publicly and he said, we have not seen a shred of evidence that Iranian nuclear program is diverting toward nuclear weapon. When Amano came, unfortunately or fortunately, I'm not going to judge, but there was a document of a US cable from US Embassy revealed by WikiLeaks saying about Amano before his election. He reported to Washington that Amano is in the US court on every strategic decision, including possible military dimension of Iranian nuclear program. He is in our hand. And when he came, immediately he started with possible military dimension issues, immediately. And you have seen more assassinations, more covert actions during Amano. That's why Iranians, they have their own conclusion that nowadays IAEA is instrument of espionage and covert action. This is really disturbing because we need to keep the credibility of the IAEA. IAEA should remain credible and should not be played in political issues. Vahid, I believe the problem is hostilities between Iran and the US, Iran and the West. But I believe the main player is the US, not Europeans. You are right, we do not have good experience with Europe either during Rafsanjani or Khatami, but the Europe was extremely under US pressures. Even during the time I was ambassador and you were in Germany, in every meeting I was discussing with the Germans, they were telling me we are under US pressure. And this was the same with all our ambassadors, all over European countries, that we are under US pressure. We have definitely our differences with Europeans on human rights, on terrorism, or weapons of mass destruction. I do not mean that we do not have any problems with them. But if we can manage with the US, the Europeans would be much more cooperative.
Hossein, my gratitude to you is expressed best by the people who are here, the rapt attention they have paid, the fact that they're still here. I apologize for going over, but I'm sure you understand so interesting and informative has Hossein been. Thank you very, very much.